Thank you all for your attendance today. I know you'll be all aware this is the last meeting in this administration of the Finance and Resource Committee. I've got a busy agenda today, as you can see, over 300 plus pages. Just to say, you know the process about the chat bar. There's a lot of members and officers here today, and it's impossible to see you all, so we all rely on the chat bar. Kirsty Brown, Andrew and myself will keep it all together, hopefully. Just before we start agenda item 1, Kirsty, have we got apologies and any substitutes? Kirsty?
Yeah, thank you, Convener. I've got a number of apologies this morning. Apologies from Councillor Stubbs and Councillor Barclay will be acting as substitute. Apologies from Councillor Curry and Councillor Douglas will be acting as substitute. Apologies from Councillor Graham and Councillor Quigley will be acting as substitute, and also apologies from Councillor Michael Coyle.
Okay, just at this late stage, is there any other apologies from anyone? No, I don't see anybody coming in with that.
Sorry, no apologies, but I do know that Fergus McGregor is having difficulty logging on. He should be on shortly.
Okay, Tracy, I think there's been a number of issues this week with IT and a number of committees, but hopefully he'll get on. Agenda item 1, let's go straight into the agenda. Declaration of interest. Is there any declaration from anyone?
Yes, Convener, Councillor Burgess, could I exclude myself from agenda item number 9 as I'm a member of the joint board, and do I need to leave the meeting for that one?
Well, you need to make your decision on that agenda item 9. Just give me a second. I'm looking at what is that item?
It's the joint board for valuation.
I think if you feel that you need to leave at that time, you can make that decision. Okay. We'll address that. We'll address that when we come to the actual item, Bob. All right. Any others?
Thank you.
Yeah, same as myself.
Who's that? Bill?
Yeah. If we had to declare an interest, then obviously I would like to do so as well.
Okay. If you're declaring an interest, can you just say who you are so Kirsty can pick that up? Anybody else?
Here, declare an interest in item number 9, the Lanarkshire Valuation Joint Board.
Okay.
Convener, Councillor McPake here. Can I declare an interest, and I won't be taking part in item 6 due to the fact I hold a taxi badge in North Lanarkshire and operate private hire. So I'll be excluded from the meeting at that point, please. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah.
Can I express an interest in the last item as I'm chair of NLP?
Okay.
Councillor
McNeill. Okay. Councillor Castles, I see your name on the chat bar.
Lanarkshire Valuation Joint Board, similar to the other councillors. I'll follow their lead. Thanks.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I would send the chat bar Councillor Trevor Douglas as agenda item 28 as a director of North Lanarkshire Properties LLP.
Apologies, Councillor Douglas, you are in the chat bar and I missed that, so there my good intentions started right away. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, anybody else? No. Councillor Damasio. Councillor.
Yeah, also as a director of NLP, agenda item 20, I think it is. I could declare an interest. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Patterrock.
Thanks, Convener. Agenda item 28 is director of NLP.
Okay. Okay. I think we've done well. Anybody else before we finally move on? No, we're okay with that. Moving straight on to the agenda.
What do you call
it? Somebody's got their microphone on.
MP.
Mary Gourley, your microphone, can you please pull it to silent? You're speaking there and everybody can hear you. Okay, agenda item 2A is here for your approval. There's 2 items, 2A and 2B. Are you happy to agree those 2 reports? Yeah. If you don't mind, members, I'll take that silence is golden. I've got some hand notes going up and some head notes, and head nods, sorry, and we'll take it from there. Thank you very much. Agenda item 3 is actually a positive report for employees. Agenda item 3, pages 13 to 28. Fiona, you want to take us briefly through the report?
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, colleagues. So this report, as the Convener said, is a very positive report, and it brings forward a proposal for the Council to extend its current benefits scheme for employees by introducing an additional salary sacrifice scheme which would allow them to purchase an electric or hybrid vehicle. The scheme would be in addition to our popular Cycle to Work scheme, which has also recently been extended to include electric bikes. The Council's been exploring this approach over the last 12 months in line with its wider ambitions to reach net zero by 2030. But in addition, and I'll explore this later in the report, we have taken the time to consider all aspects of the administration of an electric vehicle scheme, because it's more complex than the Cycle to Work scheme and there are more considerations for both the Council and for employees, and these are set out in the report in paragraphs 2.5 to 2.8. So taking all this into consideration, we feel that now is probably the right time to bring forward such a proposal to develop a full scheme in the coming year. The timing fits with our move to hybrid working, but we also feel it would be of wider benefit to all staff, particularly in the current climate where we are seeing significant rises in the cost of fuel. The report has a lot of detail, including illustrations and modelling of what the costs and benefits to employees and the Council would be, but I'm very conscious that you have a huge agenda this morning, so I'm not going to go into any detail of the report, but I just want to highlight a few items of note. You'll note in paragraph 1.8 that due to the additional considerations which I mentioned with this type of scheme, we have reviewed the full detail of the proposal with our finance colleagues, and we've also checked how the scheme is working in other local authorities. You'll also note in paragraph 2.10 that the potential savings to the Council for the scheme at a 1% uptake could be in the region of 1.2 million over 3 years. So there are some real benefits for both employees and for the Council. That said, paragraph 2.1.3 also notes that even at the uptake level of around 0.3%, which is much lower, there would still be a saving to the Council in the region of 350,000 over 3 years, but we expect that the uptake of the car scheme is likely to exceed what we're seeing with the Cycle to Work scheme, and we've already had a number of inquiries from employees about when it actually will be available for them to adopt. So at this stage, we are seeking just dispensation from the committee to proceed with the proposal that's in front of you and to engage in a procurement exercise to find a suitable partner who will support us with the scheme. We expect a further detailed paper will be brought to yourselves for approval when the actual full scheme has been worked through in detail and we are proposing to implement. That will take place later in the year when the new administration is in place. And I just want to pick up that paragraph 2.1.6 should say launch in Q1 2023, in line with that timeline that I've just outlined, not Q1 2022. Happy to take any questions at this point.
Thank you, Fiona. I said at the start there, it's quite a very positive report, given everything that's going on in the big world out there with fuel and everything else. Councillor Goldie, you've got a question.
Thanks, Convener. Just a very positive report. It's just a question on the infrastructure. When we're talking about maybe going into a partner of that, is there any position where they might provide additional car charging points or that? If we do have a large pickup, there may be competition for spaces with the charging points in them.
I'm not aware that that's part of the contract and that it would be for the purchase of vehicles, but my colleague Nicole Patterson would probably be able to give you a better insight. But certainly it's in line with all the activity that we're doing across the council area around electric charging points, and that includes the council estate itself. So hopefully that covers your question, Councillor Goldie.
Okay. Is there any other questions? I don't see anybody else in the chat bar. Members, can you agree the paper? Yeah, you're getting the nods here. Thank you very much for doing the report. Agenda item 4, again, it's Fiona. And again, it's a new policy, it's a positive report. And I think I'd make reference under section 1.5 that the trade unions have all been consulted on this. A very positive report. Fiona, do you want to come in?
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, this report is part of an ongoing joint programme of work with NHS Lanarkshire, which is intended really at heart to increase rates of breastfeeding across North Lanarkshire, given that rates are significantly lower than the Scottish average. So it's part of a programme of work that the Council has been working jointly with NHS Lanarkshire on for some time. Our ultimate aim is to become an accredited breastfeeding local authority in support of that wider health and wellbeing strategy which has been set out by NHS Lanarkshire. As part of that journey, we require to upgrade what is currently a guidance note approach in terms of breastfeeding to a full breastfeeding policy. And we're seeking approval from committee for us to launch that breastfeeding policy formally as part of that wider cultural journey across the council to support breastfeeding. I just want to also then highlight that in paragraphs 2.7 and 2.8, that further work following the launch of the policy, further work will be undertaking to put in place education and other supports to ensure that managers are fully aware of their responsibilities and how they can support a new mother returning to work to breastfeed her child, because we understand that policy in and of itself is not going to necessarily change the culture and put in place the right supports for mothers returning to work. So as I said, we're seeking approval of the committee for the launch of the policy in April of this year, and that would be subject to full ratification at council in its last meeting in March. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you, Fiona. Members, have you any questions on the report for agenda item 4? I see no one in the chat bar. The recommendations, members, are on page 29. Are you happy to agree with that report? Yes. Great. Next agenda item is the licensing of the sexual entertainment venues, pages 41 to 120. Members, you know that we've received a number of emails on this item, and you'll also know that Archie Aiken sent out an email to us all covering the items. I think there's been a bit of a misunderstanding in a general sense of this. But Archie's going to take us and give us a bit of an explanation to the report. Archie, do you want to come in?
Yes, thanks, Convener, and good morning, members. It's quite a lengthy report. It runs to almost 80 pages, so I'm not intending, particularly given the size of the agenda today, to go into it in any great detail. This is the third time a report relating to sexual entertainment venues has come to this committee, so I don't intend to rehearse the background to all of that is set out in the report. I'll start, however, by highlighting and apologising for a typo at paragraph 1.7 of the report, where in relation to a presumption of refusal of an application relating to a location close to sensitive premises, and the definition of sensitive premises is set out in the policy statement. The reference there is to 250 miles. Clearly, that's an error. It should be 250 metres. In terms of the recommendations of the report, there's a draft licensing policy statement attached at Appendix 2. That was the subject of a recent consultation, and a summary of the responses to the consultation is set out in Appendix 1. The mechanism used to carry out the consultation is known as SurveyMonkey, and the various graphs that you see in Appendix 1 setting out or summarising the responses to the various questions has been generated by that. If members are agreeable to approving the licensing policy statement, that you'll see the recommendations, the timescale there for that being published, and thereafter the licensing regime coming into force on the 27th of May. I'm recommending to you a general presumption at recommendation 5 that there be 0 sexual entertainment venues in North Lanarkshire and in each of the relevant locality areas, and also, as I say, at recommendation 6, a presumption that there should not be, if any application was indeed successful, any such premises within 250 metres of a sensitive premises, and that could include churches, schools, nurseries, etc. So far as the report itself is concerned, as I say, it very much summarises a lot of what you've heard before. As the convener mentioned, there has been a bit of a misunderstanding, I think, out there in terms of what the council's intention is here. I don't intend to say too much about that, only to just reiterate what I've said to you all before, which is if we don't have a licensing regime in place, it would be a free-for-all, there would be no regulation and certainly no enforcement in relation to any concerns about public safety or indeed those working in such establishments. To have a licensing regime in force allows the council to first of all have that presumption of zero premises, but in the event that any application is made to the regulatory committee, then to allow that committee to determine that against the very detailed policy set out in Appendix 2. I have my colleague John McCluskey, licensing solicitor, in attendance this morning, and both myself and John are more than happy to deal with any questions that you have about this. Thanks, convener.
Thank you, Archie. Councillor Hume, Jim Hume. Jim.
Thanks, Chair. Archie, you specifically mentioned item 5 on page 42, and I had a note. It seems contradictory, suggesting there'll be a general presumption and there'll be zero venues when there's such a comprehensive licensing policy in place. That seems to contradict each other. Could you explain what you mean by general presumption and why have that if we are agreeing that there should be a licensing policy in place?
Okay, no, I can quite see, Councillor Hume, where that could cause a degree of confusion. So the starting point for such a regime is the legislation that was introduced by the Scottish Government on the back of a couple of quite detailed consultations, and as I've said before, a Court of Session case which ruled that you couldn't use liquor licensing to control such premises. The legislation then gave rise to statutory guidance, which again I've made reference to at committee. That statutory guidance and indeed the legislation allows for a presumption of zero, so long as the council's in a position to evidence that. So the consultation process that was carried out recently provides us with the evidence, and you'll see yourself in Appendix 1 the kind of overwhelming views about such premises operating in the council's area. There is a legal obstacle to councils or indeed any public body deciding in advance of any application the outcome of such an application. It's called fettering your own discretion. So in kind of natural justice terms and in terms of the legislation, it still allows for applications to be made. So we need the licensing framework to deal with the applications, but the policy statement here is very clear as to the council's intention broadly in a policy sense without addressing any particular application. So we can't prevent applications coming in, and these have to be determined by the regulatory committee, but we are allowed, so long as we can evidence it, a zero presumption, and that's what I'm recommending to members today. Without sounding like a broken record, which I'm prone to do sometimes, if we didn't have this licensing regime in place, there would be no basis for any application being made, and any premises so minded or any operator of premises so minded could simply open them up without the council having any recourse to regulation or enforcement. I hope that answers the question.
I think it does, Councillor Hume, because when I got the report first hand, I asked the very same question and was given assurances like you've been given just now, and that's an important part of it. Okay, Councillor Burgess, I've got a hand up for yourself, is that correct? On you go.
Thanks, convener. Can I ask the Archie and the licensing officer as well? I presume that these premises would need a drinks licence as well. Does that come into regulatory, or will it come to licensing for the license?
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor Burgess. Any application for a liquor licence would be dealt with by the licensing board. This is a separate licensing regime, which is again because liquor licensing can't regulate such premises in a non-consumption of alcohol sphere.
Okay, that's clarified that point. I don't have anybody else on the chat bar with that. So, colleagues, can we recommend can we agree? Sorry, the recommendations on page 41.
Report.
Agree report. Okay, you try to rush me on, Harry. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Agenda item 6 is on page 121 to 126. This is a recommendation. The Taxi Trade Association have been consulted on this, and there's been a modest increase on that. It's here for you with the changes in Appendix 1, changes of Appendix 2. Is there any questions to the report? If not, if we can agree the report, we can move on. Are you happy with the? Oh, sorry, Councillor Jim. In you come, Jim.
Sorry, Bob. How often do we approve recommended increases for taxi fares?
So in terms of the legislation, Councillor Hume, it should be approximately every 18 months that we would consult with the trade. I have to say initially the trade's view was that they were content to leave things as they were. However, on reflection, they came back to us at the end of last year with this very, very modest increase based on the rationale set out in the report.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I'm just wondering, Bob, in light of the significant increases in fuel prices, can they make representations because of the exceptional circumstances to amend the fares prior to that 18-month period ending?
Yes, I mean, I think if any representations were received by us, we would be looking at that in light of the kind of economic and financial issues at that point, Councillor. Yeah.
That's fine, thanks.
Thanks, and I've got Greg. And you come, Greg.
Chair, thanks very much. Following on for Councillor Hume's economic questions in relation to the trade, the question I have is in relation to the consultative data here. How much of the Taxi Trade Association has been consulted with? Chair, if officers could answer that.
Okay, thanks. Archie?
Well, in terms of the consultation, the consultation is carried out with the local trade associations, so it's a matter for them and their members in terms of the response. But I'm satisfied that we've carried out a proper consultation. We've got the responses. As I say, initially it was the status quo. On reflection, they've come back and indicated that slight increase. So the process has been carried out as it always has been in the past.
Thank you for that, Archie.
Supplementary, Chair, sorry if that's possible.
Greg, yes, what? Then you come.
Thanks very much, Chair, because obviously the concern I have here is, Chair, obviously due process being followed in relation to consulting with the Trade Association. However, anybody that knows anything about the taxi sort of trade will be aware that the Trade Association only represents a small part and the number of taxi drivers are currently present within the authority. So the question would be, would there be any possibility of a future date, Archie, to extend that consultation process, or is the Council quite firm that it will only deal with the Trade Association?
No, nothing is set in stone, Councillor. So if there were concerns being received that the responses that we were getting weren't representative or weren't capturing a sufficient volume of operators or drivers, then I'm more than happy to look at reviewing that consultation process. So, I mean, if you want to approach me offline with any concerns that have been passed to yourself, I'm more than happy to look at those.
Thanks very much, Archie. Thanks, Chair.
I think, Greg, just to say that the questions that came from Councillor Hume and yourself, Archie's gave a response that there's an open door there to his office on any matter like that. Okay? Right, agenda item 6. Can we agree the report on page 121? Yes, I'm getting it on. Agenda item 7, pages 127 to 170. It's the Treasury Management strategy. Elaine, you want to say a few words on this?
Yep, I will. Thanks, convener. It's a fairly lengthy and technical report, but I'll just go through some of the main highlights briefly. First of all, the Council produces an annual Treasury management strategy, and it sets out all our policies, practices and activities that Financial Solutions will undertake in the year. The overriding aim of the strategy is to make sure that the Council operates within a sound financial environment, and the strategy is fully detailed in the appendix to my report. The strategy fully complies with the requirements that we have to comply with in associated borrowing investment legislation and with all SIPFA codes of best practice for Treasury management and the Prudential codes. Section 3 of the strategy should be highlighted to you. It gives an update on the outlook for interest rates as advised by Arlene Close, who are our Treasury advisors. But the main point for you to know is that the Treasury strategy forecasts have been updated to reflect recent interest rate increases by the Bank of England for both long and short-term borrowing. And the strategy also includes prudent budget estimates for these interest rate costs with assumed higher rates every year than the current market forecasts. And what that means is it ensures that the Council has sufficient budget provision and can absorb some further increases in market rates to a degree, as long as they're relatively small and incremental. But as you would expect, the team will keep all of that under review. The proposed borrowing strategies in section 4, and that ensures that increases in borrowing and debt levels will be prudent, affordable and sustainable. Section 5 gives the principles and the approach to investing our temporary cash balances, and that's always given due consideration to security, liquidity and return, which are the main considerations in any investment decisions that we take. The Treasury strategy will be implemented to manage significant capital expenditure, which you'll be aware of, but I would highlight that this report contains the latest estimates at the time of writing, but may be subject to change once the updated capital investment programme is considered by Policy and Strategy at its next meeting. But any changes will be reported back through future Treasury monitoring reports. The impact of the capital investment plans are assessed by setting the Council's prudential and Treasury management indicators for the next 3 years, and all of that set out in sections 7 to 9 of the policy, and they show that the plans in totality are affordable, prudent and sustainable. And my final point, convener, would be that section 10, which covers the financial flexibilities, that was introduced as a new element in the strategy last year, and within this updated strategy there is an update on the options which are still under consideration about financial flexibilities. They've been advised by Scottish Government but not yet fully clarified, but by including them in this strategy it means that the Council will be able to call on them if they become available and are indeed required. That's all I would like to say on that, convener, but I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Elaine. As Elaine had said, it's a very technical, detailed report. Councillor Hume, you have a question, Kelly.
Thanks, Chair. In the report, you highlight all the different areas of borrowing that the Council uses, Elaine, and I know in the past that the Public Works Loan Board has been the best option to borrow from. In light of inflation, though, going above 5%, are you seeing any increase in the cost of loans to the Council? Has that started yet?
We haven't seen anything as yet, Councillor Hume. We will continue to use the Public Works Loan Board as our main go-to for borrowing, if you like, and it's linked to UK government gilts, which to some extent are more protected from interest rate rises. But the important point I would make to you is that we work very closely with our Treasury advisors, and we continue to monitor with them and take their advice. We have regular meetings with them, and they advise us on what would be a good point at which to undertake new borrowing in light of interest rate rises, but as yet no opportunities have been identified.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Tom Castles.
Thanks, Chair. Apologies if the answer to this appears in the paper because it is quite a long paper and I've been looking for it. It's actually on page 156, Annex B, for the explanation of the long-term rating definitions. How do those definitions come about?
What page are you on there, Tom? 136.
We're on page 136. Councillor Castles, these are definitions from the industry itself. In terms of exactly how they come about, I couldn't answer that at this stage, but I'll look into it and speak to you out with the meeting if that helps.
It's absolutely fine.
That's helpful. Okay, we're still on agenda item 7. There's no more names in the chat bar. Members, can we agree the recommendations on page 127? Yes, yeah, okay, thank you very much. Agenda item 8 is the payment of local taxation and benefit updates, pages 171 to 176. Greg?
Thanks, Convener. Morning, everyone. So this report is our Set the Services quarterly update, highlighting the performance across the payment of local taxation and administration of benefits for the council. So I'll just run through each of the service areas and give a quick highlight to committee. So for council tax, at the end of January 2022, we had a greater proportion of council tax had been received at that stage of the financial year compared to the previous financial year, with 90.2% collected compared to 88.8% last financial year. However, as you'll all be aware, the impact of the pandemic during 2021 means that that's not necessarily a good comparison. So for reference, the comparison in the report is provided for the 1920 financial year, and our current performance in the current financial year compares favourably in relation to that, with a 0.1% improvement. For non-domestic rates, collection is up 2% compared to the last financial year, and it's worth highlighting to committee that there are a number of continuing COVID-related reliefs applicable in the current financial year, particularly for areas such as retail, hospitality and leisure. However, those reliefs will reduce during 2022-23 as a level of ongoing restrictions on businesses is removed in line with the Scottish Government strategic framework. So that will be something that we'll be monitoring throughout the next financial year to see the impact that has on collection levels across the board. For benefits, the council continues to perform well against the Scottish average in relation to our length of time to process new claims and change of circumstances. In particular, for new claims, we are processing 5 days quicker than the Scottish average, and we continue to see year-on-year improvements in our performance in that regard. For the Scottish Welfare Fund, we continue to receive a very, very high volume of claims for both crisis grants and community care grants. As at the 31st of January, the service had assessed over 1,000 more claims, and that's 7% more claims compared to the same period for 2021. So that's a significant additional admin burden for the service, and puts a significant pressure on the team in trying to manage these claims. However, the award levels for both schemes continue to be high, with around 75% of crisis grant applications and 82% of community care grant applications resulting in an award. And both of those are reflective of the council continuing to maintain a medium priority level for schemes to ensure that they reach as wide a range of people as possible. Expenditure to date, up to the 31st of January, represents about 78% of the total funding available in the current financial year. And it's worth noting to committee that for the first time we're heading for an overspend on core funding. And that's for two reasons. An overspend of £150,000 projected. A higher average award for crisis grants. So for every award, the value of it has increased during the current financial year. And then we've had a significantly higher volume of community care grants being received in the year. And for those two reasons, that's why we've got a projected overspend. However, for the current financial year, you'll all be aware that the Scottish Government has provided the Tackling Financial Insecurity Fund, and that has been used in the current year to support that overspend, so it's not going to have an impact on the council's own resources. In addition to that, the balance of that Tackling Insecurity funding and the one-off funding of £500,000 approved through the council's 22-23 budget in February means that the council should be able to maintain a priority level of medium for the Scottish Welfare Fund throughout 22-23, but that will continue to be kept under review. Also within the Scottish Welfare Fund umbrella, the service administers the Self-Isolation Support Grant, and that's on behalf of the Scottish Government. As at the 31st of January, we'd awarded just under 3,000 of those applications during 21-22 for a total of just under £1.5 million. And as you'll all be aware, throughout the last few months, we've been living through the Omicron variant and the impact that's had on case numbers. And throughout throughout January and February, throughout December and January, the case numbers and the application numbers surged significantly, and we had a massive spike in the number of applications. We went from having around about 400 applications a month in October and November to over 2,000 in January, nearly 3,000 actually in January, and around about 2,000 in December. So that significant surge in demand has created a huge pressure on the service's ability to manage claims, especially given that we're also experiencing at the same time an increased level of applications for both crisis grants and community care grants. But to support that, what we've done within Financial Solutions and across the rest of the council is redeploy staff from other areas and deprioritised other work to ensure that we can tackle that backlog that's resulted from the massive surge in demand. So as a result, the service is now on target with processing crisis grants, and it's significantly improved its performance in relation to both community care grants and self-isolation support grants. In addition to that, we're also in the process of finalising the recruitment of additional temporary posts that should be in place until October, and that will help us administer these grants and administration of new grant schemes that are likely to be on stream over the course of 22-23. Last thing on the report is just on the discretionary housing payments, and it's just to give an update on where we are with spend. So the current financial year, we're spending around about 8% more than we had the same point last financial year, at £5.3 million. In addition, 73% of the funding we've received for non-bedroom tax-related issues has been paid or committed from the funding that's available, and we continue to work with housing and local housing associations to ensure that that's utilised in full. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Greg, for that comprehensive report. I think the part about the Scottish Welfare Fund, about resources transferring staff over and to get temporary staff in to work with the build-up of that is encouraging. I don't see any questions in the chat bar for agenda item 8. Recommendations are on page 171. Can you agree those recommendations? Yes. Thank you. Agenda item 9, page 177 to 182, is an oversight report. A number of you at the start gave a declaration about this. I think the report is here, it's self-explanatory. I don't think I need Elaine to make any comments on it, but is there any questions on agenda item 9? There's nothing in the chat bar at the moment. No. Okay, can you agree the report from recommendations in 177? Thank you. Yeah, okay. Item 10 is local taxation debt write-off. You'll know this is an annual item that comes to us. By now, you know the layout and the style of it. It's here for you. Elaine, you want to say a few brief words on it?
Thanks, Convener. Just really to say that, yeah, summary of the outstanding local taxation accounts, which have now been deemed uncollectible and are recommended for write-off because there's no further legal basis to collect the debt. But what you'll see from the tables included in the report at 2.1 and 2.2, the amount to be written off compares favourably with values written off in 2021, and I wouldn't make any further comment on at this stage, Convener.
Okay, thank you, Elaine. Agenda item 10, chat bar is empty. There's no questions to Elaine on this. The recommendations on page 183, are you happy to agree those? Yes, thank you. Next item is item 11. It's very similar, but it's been a recommendation coming from the Housing and Regeneration Committee on the tenants arrears write-off. I don't think I need to get Ali to make any comment on it. But what I'll do, if there are any questions, this was discussed at Housing. It's here for approval at our committee. Is there any questions? There's nothing in the chat bar. Agenda item 11. Can you agree the report? Yes. Agenda item 12. It's the strategic performance frameworks on page 191 to 200. Elaine, you want to say a few words on this?
Yep, thank you. The report gives the latest performance results for Financial Solutions. It includes results that relate to the nationally developed COVID dataset indicators, which for Financial Solutions relate to the volume of applications received for community care grants and discretionary housing payments. And they show an increase in volume of applications over 21 and 21-22 to date. But Greg has just highlighted that and what the service is doing to mitigate against the impact of that. So moving to Appendix 1, that's where you'll see where we currently are with all the indicators. The majority of them are green or on, which means on target, or blue, signifying they're surpassing target. However, there are 2 reds, and I'll focus on them. They're in relation to, firstly, the percentage of income due from non-domestic rates that was received by the end of the year. Less income from NDR has been received in year, and that's not surprising. It's directly attributable to the pandemic and the issues faced by many local businesses. The comments in the appendix highlight, though, that although the income received in 21-22 is still down compared to pre-pandemic levels, it is showing an improved position on last year, which is encouraging. The second red indicator is linked to the percentage of invoices that were paid within 30 calendar days of receipt. Performance processing in invoices started to dip, you'll see from the graph, in 1920 and further reduced in 2021, and that those results reflected the initial difficulties of large-scale working from home, while suppliers were still providing paper invoices to the office. The important point to note on this indicator, though, you'll see on the trend graph in the appendix that we're starting to see real improvements in performance in 21-22, and that reflects the proactive efforts by the service to improve processing capacity, and that was partly highlighted in Greg's presentation in relation to the Scottish Welfare Fund. We've also taken that approach to improve performance within the creditors team. I'm happy to take questions on that, convener.
Thank you, Elaine. Apologies, members, for when we talk about the red, amber and green and skip black and grey and whatever. I've already spoken about this and what we need to be doing in the next administration is sorting that part out. But anyway, listen, Councillor Hume, you've got a question.
Thanks, Chair. Page 197 in the appendix, the percentage of council tax to payers opting to pay by direct debit, it's currently 57.5. For some reason that seemed low to me. I thought most people paid things by direct debit now. Is there and I know it's increasing, but is there an initiative within the council to significantly increase it? And how does 57.5 collection and direct debit rate compare with the other councils in the council group?
So we are always trying to promote direct debit as our preferred form of payment, and we do that through various means, through communications directly from the council tax team, through council tax notices, etc. We have various options on the council website and through corporate communications. We really do try to promote payment by direct debit because it's better for everyone. I do believe that what we have is relatively in line with other local authorities in our group, and 57% is higher than direct debits for housing rents. I think that's actually below 50%. So what I'm actually saying is I think we are broadly in line, Councillor Hume, but I'll certainly look into that in terms of what our peer authorities are in their position.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, that's fine.
Thank you for that. I don't see any other questions or comments in the bar. Can we agree the recommendations on page 191? Yes. Yes, thank you very much. Agenda item 13 on page 201 to 206 is a review of the budget savings. Elaine?
Yep, the report gives an update on the achievement of approved savings for 21-22 and looks ahead also to 22-23. And across these two financial years, total savings of 36 million were approved. The target, first of all, for 21-22 was just over 20 million savings to be achieved, and services are reporting achievement of 76% within the current financial year, and that equates to savings achieved totaling over 15 million. It leaves 4.8 million not achieved within the year, but the majority of that will be in place for 22-23, so have been delayed, but only to the start of the next financial year. So what that does is result in a recurring gap of 978,000 that's outlined in the report, which is less than 5% of all approved savings. I think that's really positive, and it means that despite the challenges that services have faced in 21-22, more than 95% of the approved savings will either be fully achieved in year or will be in place at the start of the new financial year. So of that 978,000 shortfall, 578 was addressed as part of the medium-term financial plan report in September 21, when two savings, one related to digital classrooms and the other to cleaning in schools, and these were acknowledged as unachievable due to the pandemic. And as a result of that action around the medium-term financial plan, only 400,000 has still to be resolved permanently, and that saving relates to what was approved against a review of ASN transportation. The service is finding it extremely challenging to deliver on that saving given the current market, but it does remain committed to identifying a recurring solution to manage the shortfall. Moving on to 22-23, some savings for education and families and adult social care have been reprofiled, and you'll see those detailed in Appendix 2. They have already been reported through the relevant service committees and funding solutions described in reports to other committees. In addition, 6 million of savings which were previously attributed to adult social care services, which were intended to follow on from digital enhancements, was reversed as part of the budget setting process at the special meeting of the council on the 17th of February, and that was recognised as necessary action to reflect the pressures that are currently facing social care services. Finally, 2 million of the 3 million saving planned for active and creative communities has been delayed, and that's to allow for the full review of the future operating model, which is underway, and you'll be aware is due to be reported back in the early summer months. It has been possible to fund this delay from the non-domestic rate savings, which arose from NDR relief that was applied by Scottish Government to retail, hospitality and leisure services, and for our active and creative communities area properties, it resulted in a significant underspend linked to their property costs, so that allowed for the temporary delay of the savings pending the full review of the operating model. So that's the summary of where we are against approved savings, conveners, and again I'm happy to take questions on that.
Thank you, Elaine, for that detailed report. Councillor Hewitt, Jim?
Thanks again. Just a very brief explanation, Elaine, of and you mentioned that page 202, the 4 bullet points for reprofiling costs. Could you just is that I'm not quite sure. Could you explain that? Is it failed savings or extra savings that we need to find from these departments?
Jim, is that in section 213?
Yes.
Yeah.
Aye, sorry, Councillor Hume. No, they're not failed savings, and we're not looking for replacements at this stage. But what these represent are savings that, as a result of the pandemic, basically, the services have found particularly challenging. So, for example, looking at reconfiguration of the school week, merger and rezoning savings, the service still intends to look at plans to achieve these savings, but was recognised that it couldn't be done within the original timescale. So that's what I mean by reprofiling. They've been reported back, delays have been reported back to the relevant committee, and the saving has been extended into the next financial year. The same applies to Muir Park. Muir Park was originally targeted for closure within adult social care services, but that has been delayed given the pressure on the pandemic, brought about by the pandemic. Excuse my voice. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's clear now. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. I don't see any other names on the chat bar. Colleagues, can we agree the recommendations on page 201? Yes, thank you very much. Agenda item 14 on page 207 to 218. This is the revenue monitoring report. It's for period 10. I'll get Kathleen Shearer to say a few words on this. Kathleen?
Yes, thanks, convener. So this is the regular quarterly revenue monitoring report on the overall position for the council, mainly focusing on the general fund. The report shows the projected outturn position as at the 31st of March based on forecasts at period 10, as the convener said. At paragraph 2.1.1, you can see the overall general fund budget now stands at £864.3 million after adjusting for additional monies received throughout the year. Paragraph 2.1.3 and table 1 show a forecast surplus of just short of £21 million, which is a favourable movement of £4.185 million since the last report to committee. You can see from table 2 the movement of £4.185 million is made up of just over £1 million across service budgets, but the majority of the movement is in relation to an underspend in the budgetary provision for non-teachers pay award, and this is mainly due to additional funding provided by Scottish Government to contribute to the one-off cost element of the pay award, and the fact that we budgeted for 2%. And the actual cost is estimated now just to be under the 2%. Paragraphs 2.2.2 and 2.2.8 provide a high-level overview of all the variances contributing to this overall surplus position. And just a couple other things to draw to your attention. At section 2.4, that gives a brief update on the savings which Elaine has just talked through, and that delay or shortfall in delivering £4.8 million worth of savings is reflected in the overall monitoring position. Section 2.5 and appendices 3 and 4 give an update on the earmarked reserves, the forecast change management fund and general fund unallocated reserves position. And I just want to highlight at paragraph 2.5.4, as was advised as part of the budget report in February, the Change Management Fund and unallocated general fund reserves are both required to support future budget pressures and one-off costs of approved savings, and to ensure the council has a sustainable and resilient financial plan. So the forecast Change Management Fund costs were reviewed, and it was deemed prudent to make a further provision for future one-off costs of £12.3 million. So this requires a drawdown from the general unallocated surpluses, leaving a forecast unallocated reserves balance to carry forward to 22-23 at this point in time of £20.3 million. Finally, nearer the end of the report, you'll see there is a reported position given an update on the HRA. At paragraph 2.7, they're projecting an underspend of around £3 million, and there's some information provided to explain this position. And adult social care at paragraph 2.8 are also reporting an underspend of £6.4 million, mainly in relation to underspends and payments to other bodies due to staff shortages. So overall, convener, a positive position which strengthens the financial sustainability of the council and helps provide options to the council for future budget challenges. However, I would like to emphasise that the current reported underspends are largely one-off in nature and will not see a repeat of that in future years. So going back to recommendations, committee is simply asked to acknowledge the reported position.
Thanks, Kathleen. I've got one chat bar, one member in the chat bar, Councillor Sherwood Junction.
Thanks again, Chair. On page 207 in the summary, it says confirmed redetermination amounts. I don't recollect having seen that specific description in finance reports before. Could you explain exactly what that means? Is it extra money coming in you weren't anticipating, or what?
It's not necessarily money we weren't anticipating. Some of it is funds that are undistributed, and we know that, and some are additional funds that are announced throughout the year, but often we're not given it until late in the financial year. Most of them come in March, and they're referred to as redeterminations. It's just further allocations of monies.
Right. Is it always uncertain, or is it clear that you'll be made aware of it late every year for the budget?
So, for example, this year, you'll remember from the budget there was quite a lot of unallocated funds as part of the circular. So we make assumptions in relation to some of these, but not all of them, because quite often some of the undistributed funds, the basis of the distribution methodology has not been determined. So it's not possible for us to make assumptions. So there's a bit of certainty with some, but less certainty with others, is what I would say.
Okay. Thank you, Jan. Thank you for.
If I need any more information on that, I'll take it outside the committee, Bob. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you. There's no other names in the chat bar, colleagues. Recommendations are on page 207. Can you agree the report? Yes. Yeah, thank you. Agenda item 15, pages 219 to 230 is almost the very same report, but obviously this covers the Chief Exec and other corporate services section. Kathleen gave us an overview of the overall position. Is there any questions to agenda item 15? As it links into clearly agenda item 14. Agenda item 15, there's no names in the chat bar. Can we agree the recommendation? Yep, thank you very much. Agenda item 16, the capital program. Monitoring report, again, this is pages 231 to 238.
Yep, thanks very much, Convener. So this again is the capital programme. This is a standard report we bring to each committee cycle to provide an update on the resources and expenditure within the Council's capital programmes. So the position today, we've highlighted in paragraph 1.4 that the position we're presenting at this stage in the financial year is reflective of two fairly significant reprofiling exercises that we've done throughout the current financial year. Firstly, approved through the Policy and Strategy Committee in September, and the second one approved through the Strategic Capital Delivery Group in December. Both of those exercises have reflected on the significant COVID-19 and Brexit related challenges that have been faced throughout the capital programme. And they've all been kind of well rehearsed, so I'm not going to go into detail, but ultimately it's really just been about the challenge for the construction sector and the external market to support our programme delivery and the challenges that has created for us being able to spend the money that's been approved. So as a result of all that, the programme delivery has been reprofiled to future years of the capital 5-year capital planning period. And the outcome of that is subject to a report at the upcoming Policy and Strategy Committee, where the committee will be asked to consider that reprofiled programme over the remaining 5 years. For the current year and the current budget, the General Services Capital Programme is projecting a £291,000 over budget or acceleration, and that's reflective of two main areas. Firstly, within enterprise and communities, additional costs linked to the completion of the Drumbeck and Garrow River Restoration Project. Trips off the tongue brilliantly. These costs will be funded through the remainder of the 5-year capital programme. And then secondly, within adult social care, we've seen increased costs in relation to procurement of stair lifts and step lifts. So in adult social care, they're projecting being £128,000 over budget. And again, the expectation is that will be funded through the remainder of the 5-year programme. At this stage, or at the stage of the report being produced, which is period 10 for early January, around 84% of the capital programme is legally committed, and that was at that stage with almost a quarter of the financial year to go. So we're not expecting any significant changes to this outturn position as the year progresses, but that's something that the services and the Strategic Capital Delivery Group will keep under review. The report also highlights the current position in relation to the housing capital investment programmes. That position has already been reported through the Housing Regeneration Committee and reflects an overall underspend in the current financial year of £13.5 million. Similar to the General Fund programme, the HRA Mainstream programme has experienced the exact same supply and contractor issues linked to lockdowns and the ability for external contractors to deliver. So as a result of that, the Housing and Regeneration Committee, the last one just a month ago, considered a revised 5-year capital programme to tackle and to manage these reprofiling issues, much in the same way as the General Fund is bringing a report to Policy and Strategy Committee for consideration. So other than that, fairly positive report of where we are with the capital programme delivery, given the challenges we've had in the current financial year, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you very, very much. There's no comments coming in on the chat bar for agenda item 16. Colleagues, can you agree the recommendations on page 231? Yes, thank you. Colleagues, I understand that my sound is maybe coming and going a wee bit. I've adjusted my computer here at this end, so hopefully it'll be a bit better. I think you maybe pick it up a bit better now. We're going to agenda item 17, to Treasury Management Monitoring Report, the quarterly report. Now, we touched on this before with the Treasury Management. I think it's here for your noting. Is there any questions to this particular report on agenda item 17? No, no. Can we agree the report, page 239? Thank you very much. Contracts, agenda item 18. This is for contracts for noting. It's for Security Plus cash collection services. You'll note that under the executive summary, there's a new tender will be undertaken in 2022. So this is an interim report we're having here. Are you happy to agree the report? Is there any questions on agenda item 18? No? Okay, are you happy to agree the report 247? Yeah, thank you very much. Agenda item 19 is contracts awarded below committee approval. They are listed here for you on the appendices at the back. Is there any questions to the report for agenda item 19? Are you happy to agree the report? Yes, I'm getting the thumbs up. Agenda item 20 is a proposed substation. We're moving into a number of property-related reports, colleagues, so just bear with us. Agenda item 20 is a proposed substation. It's noted in Appendix A. I think this is a straightforward report, colleagues. Is there any questions that you have for agenda item 20? No? No, there's nothing in. Can you agree the recommendations based on page 257? Thank you. Thank you. Agenda item 21 is another property report. It's a 5-year lease. Again, it's a rather straightforward report. Is there any questions to agenda item 21? No? Can we agree the report on page 261?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item 22 is the reallocation of land at Morven Street in Coatbridge. Who's speaking to this report? It's
Convener, it's myself that will speak to this report.
Sorry?
It's Nicole, it's myself.
Sorry, of course, Nicole, you're speaking to the report. On you come, Nicole.
Thank you very much, Convener. So this report is a request from Environmental Assets for committee to reconsider the reallocation of land adjacent to Coltswood Cemetery in Coatbridge in order to provide an extension to increase burial layers. Since the date of the previous report to committee, two key actions have taken place. Environmental Assets have moved to implement the Council's burial strategy, approved by the Environment and Transportation Committee in May 2019. But following a further review of the strategic implementation of that burial strategy in May 2021, the team have not been able to identify any suitable land in the area for burial provision. And secondly, it is noted that only one sports team has requested to utilise the disused playing facility and that they have been successfully redirected to alternative facilities by colleagues in active and creative communities. In terms of the report, members will note that paragraphs 2.1 to 2.5 cover the burial strategy for North Lanarkshire Council. Paragraphs 2.6 to 2.7 cover the sports provision and the emerging sports strategy for the Council. Appendix 1 shows the extent of the site at Morven Street, some 6.65 acres, and Appendix 2 maps out pitches and the availability across the wider area. This report today is to seek consent for the reallocation of land at Morven Street to Environmental Assets for the potential to extend Coltswood Cemetery to deal with the demand for burials in this area. This would only happen if any Sports Scotland requirements are met, planning approval granted, and SEPA are satisfied. Really, members, the key point of this report is that if the land isn't allocated to potentially develop an extension to the existing Coltswood Cemetery, then past the projected current run-out date of February 2026, there will be no burial provision within Coatbridge. The closest provision exists at New Monkland Cemetery in Airdrie, which currently has a projected run-out date of May 2031. There are two key recommendations within the report, and I'm happy to take any questions. I do have colleagues from across the various council services involved at committee today, in assets and procurement, active and creative communities, and of course, my own colleagues in environmental assets. But in the first instance, Convener, I'll answer the questions myself.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got in the chat bar, there's two at the moment. Kirsten Larson. Kirsten, for clarity, you're not a member of the committee?
No, I've asked to come along and speak as a local representative, Chair, and I appreciate that opportunity, but I think I maybe come in too quick because I know that Tracy's going to move an amendment. She might want to do that ahead of me speaking.
Kirsten, just for clarity, I think there was a request come in from yourself to come to the committee. It's at the discretion of the convener that was allowed. It's also at the discretion of the convener to allow debate from that person, and I'm not giving that today. I'm doing that under precedent. Okay, so if there's an amendment to the motion, a seconder, then that's absolutely fine. But just for clarity, Kirsten, you will not be able to take part in the debate today. Obviously, you know you can't vote, and I'm ruling on that. So Tracy, Councillor Carragher, have you got an amendment?
Yes, I have. It was circulated earlier to Kirsty.
Kirsty, do you want to put it up? I haven't seen any of it. Okay, I'm satisfied. I've read it. It is a proper amendment. Kirsty, have you sent that out to the members as well, Kirsty, by email? Kirsty?
Sorry, Convener, I'm struggling to get off mute there. No, I haven't. I'll do that just now.
It's just for members to have that themselves. Tracy, have you got a seconder for this?
Yes, it's Jim Hume.
Jim Hume seconded it. Tracy, do you want to speak on your amendment?
Yes, thanks. So the request to repurpose this land has been brought before members of the council on several occasions now, and each time committee has voted against it. I think firstly it is important that we do note the contents of the report put before us today. However, I'm sure that every member of this committee will agree that any decision made moving forward, it should be a fully informed one, and that's what the purpose of this amendment from the SNP group is today. We need more information. Committee previously agreed that this site should be brought back into use as a sports playing field. That was a decision made by the committee. I note that at 1.6 it states, since the decision was made that only one formal request was received from a local team to use this space. That makes an assumption that the decision was made based on any formal requests coming forward, and that was not the case. A full report is required outlining why a decision made by the elected members of this council was not implemented. Secondly, I'm sure you'll all agree that it makes sense to wait for the report on the sports pitch strategy. And lastly, but I think most importantly, we're here to represent the members of our communities and ensure that their wishes are taken into account. No decision should be made on the repurposing of this land until a full public consultation is undertaken and the results are fed back. I trust that all members of this committee agree to the points that I've just highlighted, and I would really ask for your support for this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I bring your seconder in, Kirsty, can you remove the amendment from the screen, please? Okay, Jim Hume, have you got anything to say to second it?
Just the points that my colleague made in terms of the public consultation and waiting on the conclusions of the Sport Scotland decision. I'm happy to support the local member and seconding this amendment, Bob.
Okay, Jim. I've got a few speakers now coming in. Councillor Cullen, David.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a memory like I said, but I'm pretty sure that when this came up, I actually supported the views of Councillor Stubbs at the time. However, what I would say is that whilst to a certain extent I would agree with the amendment and the ask from the previous report in 2019, there is a real pressure with time on here in terms of if we don't allow this to go ahead, then Coatbridge will run out of burial space potentially in 2023. And that's not a position we want to put communities in. Councillor Carricker rightly said we're here to represent communities. Be under no illusions that when representing families and communities at a time of need such as a bereavement, we need to make sure that there's provision in place. It brings me on sort of to talk about the strategy and the content of the report. It's disappointing that in North Lanarkshire, the strategy's got a hierarchy, and that hierarchy is premised upon the provision of cemetery space to local communities. People in Kilsyth don't want buried in Bellshill, and people in Motherwell don't want buried in Coatbridge. They want local cemetery provision. So it's disappointing at this stage to see that we're on the verge of running out of cemetery space. And I don't blame current officers for this, because cemetery strategy should be taking a 25 to 50 year approach at least. So it's disappointing to see that Coatbridge is potentially going to run out of burial space between 2023 and 2026, and that the next best option is Airdrie, which is going to run out in 2031. I would like to think as an authority we've thought about this well beyond and up to 2050, the 50 years beyond there. So while I agree with the contents of the amendment, I would caution members to bear in mind that any delay on this now could potentially have a serious impact on the ability of people in Coatbridge to bury their loved ones. They're potentially going to have to move them here or elsewhere. And Coatbridge, as we know, is quite a high percentage of burials as opposed to cremations. One other point I would like to make is, I've been dealing with a local football team myself, and the pitch strategy is due to come. I mean, irrespective of the decision around this football pitch, right? that pit strategy should capture whether there are any gaps and what the council's future plans are in relation to pitches. So, no, I don't think we have to wait on that decision. I think that we could be pretty sure that the pit strategy will take into account the loss of this facility, provided it's approved at committee. So while I've got sympathy with the amendment, and I do really sympathise with Councillor Carricker, and I hope this gets passed on to Councillor Stubbs, I do think we're under pressure of time here, and we need to bear that in mind when we make a decision. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cullen. I've got three other members, Councillor Shields, Councillor Logue and Councillor McPake. Bill Shields.
Thanks, Convener. Convener, I think maybe like 20 years ago I would maybe support the SNP on this, but I've had so many dealings with Morven Park over the years. I can remember going back in the day when I approached the then Leisure and Recreation Convener, which is none other than the leader of the council, Jim Logue, on a number of occasions about Morven. It's continual vandalism because it's the peripheral area that it's in. It can't be viewed by the people that live next to it. On a number of occasions, I was on to him, pestering him to get vandalism sorted out, all this kind of thing that had to be done. Once that a lot of money had been spent on it, and then it became a kind of expensive drinking den up there, and at the front door it was set on fire, so again, you've been notified, because at that time I remember when Coatbridge High used it, it was a preferred grass park at the time. So we did do our best to ensure it was back up. But the door was set on fire, so we stuck a big steel door on it. It cost a fortune, I think, and it's still there to this day. But not long after that, the roof was they gained access through the roof. And stole copper, and I can't remember what it was, but so we spent a fortune on this. And colleagues, I worked with North Lanarkshire Council, and I worked as a supervisor in the Mark Busby Sports Complex a number of years ago. And one of the things that we were responsible for was the small pavilions, and you would dread the day that they would come in, or you'd get a report from the police that they'd been vandalised, and you had to use staff from the centre to go out there and clean the place up. That was the same when I moved to South Lanarkshire Council as well. You got the same thing. The satellites, pavilions, the standalone places, they always were susceptible to vandalism, and that's the case. And a lot of authorities are moving away from that now. So I have no problem with the report on this. As far as I can see, we've spent. I'd love to know how much money over the years we've spent on Morven to try and bring it up to what's needed for it to work. And I also remember, I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think I am, that the local MSP was part of a petition that was a complaint from the people in the area that when the park was getting used, the people the people that were using the park were parking outside on people's driveways and so on. So if we had to upgrade this, we would have to upgrade the car park within the place as well. And I just don't think we've got the money for that. Colleagues, I've read the report here, I think, and using, and just echoing what David Cullen was saying, we've got a strategy here that we have to use to try and get more barrels within Coatbridge. And I, as a local member, I would prefer to see us, with the limited resources we've got, used to ensure that we can get the people of Coatbridge interned in Coatbridge after 2024. And I'd be happy at this stage to either second the convener as a local member, and happy to go by this report. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Shields. Thank you for that. Councillor Logue.
Thanks very much, Chair. Governance should always be based on priorities. And what's the priority here? Is the priority a football pitch? Let's reflect on the provision of football pitches close to Coleswood. We've got 2 pitches in Dunbeth Park, which is less than half a mile away. We've got 6 pitches in St Ambrose, which is just over 1 mile. And we've got 4 pitches in St Andrews, which is 1.5 miles away. Contrast and compare that with the cemetery. Paragraph 2.5 is so pertinent and so salient when you look at it. and Nicole highlighted it in her verbal presentation today. Coatbridge will run out of burial space by 2026. Are we asking communities of Coatbridge to travel out of Coatbridge to bury their loved ones? Is that really what we want? Is that what local members in Coatbridge want to be associated with? We have no provision in Coatbridge to bury your loved ones. Please travel to Airdrie, and when Airdrie ceases in 2031, then travel further thereafter. That is a shaming indictment on local members to articulate that perspective. I think the recommendations in this report are axiomatic, make sense, and ones that every member of this committee should associate with.
Thank you, Councillor Logg. Councillor McPeak.
Thanks, Convener. I think most of what I was going to say has already been said it very well. Starting with Councillor Cullen, I thought he summed it up perfectly. And it's local here, and to think that we're going to turn down this opportunity again, the mistake was made in 2019 here. This is vitally important to Coatbridge and the surrounding areas. All we need to do is look at what's happened to Bedley Cemetery. I know there's hopefully provision coming there very soon as well. The people in Northern Corridor have been without burial grounds since 2013, 2014. They've had to travel either Cumbernauld or further afield to Coatbridge. We don't want that to happen in Coatbridge. We've got a chance here to do the right thing. I mean, Councillor Logue just summed up perfectly the sports provision within half a mile each end of Coltswood Cemetery, with St Ambrose and Dunbeth Park. Now, Sports Scotland are going to be involved in this. I would be recommending to Sports Scotland that we get further investment into Dunbeth Park and upgrade the facilities there. And also, if you take in St Andrews High School as well, in Coatbridge, good facilities down there. The new campus is going to be built in Cambro. They're underway with it just now. I'm sure there'll be good sports facilities within there. So within Coatbridge, we're going to have fantastic sports facilities, but not for graves. And it's a grave concern to me that we really need to do something about this today. So I hope you all do the right thing and get this through. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jordan London.
Thanks very much, Convener. Can I just begin by saying that it is disappointing to hear members, particularly the leader, attack local members this morning at committee when local members are just trying to reflect the views of local people. How can Councillor Logue and others say what local members want when they haven't actually had the chance to speak this morning? I mean, I noted your decision. Councillor Larson is here, Councillor Stubbs unable to be here. Councillor Larson's here in attendance, and she requested the opportunity to speak on behalf of local people in her area and was denied that opportunity. So how can members interpret what local members are going to say or would like to say when they haven't actually had the chance to speak? There's a real democratic deficit in that respect. Local members are elected to give voice to local people, and when they're trying to do that, they are being blocked from having that opportunity. So it is disappointing. Let me add, Councillor Logue's outlined all of the nearby pitches, half a mile, etc. But what he didn't outline was the availability of those pitches, because this is a key point.
There's a point of order.
Sorry, I didn't notice it yet. Councillor Castle's point of order.
I think the moment's passed, but I don't think it's part of a debate to challenge the chair's ruling. But the moment's gone.
It's gone, Tom. Okay. Jordan.
Yes, no problem, Convener, but actually, just to clarify, I think it's entirely within my right to challenge the chair's ruling, and I think Councillor Castle would do well to appreciate if the chair wanted to challenge that, then I'm sure, Chair, you would be more than able to do that, and I'm sure you would. Let me continue by saying that the point I was making on pitches before I was interrupted is that, the councillor leader has mentioned again the availability of pitches nearby, but the key issue here is around the availability of those pitches. Pitches are bursting at the seams with interest across the board, and you'll know, Chair, even from a local perspective in the Bells Hill Community Board, time and again we have representatives come in our area saying that they can't get pitches, not only in our area but in neighbouring areas either, because the lets are full and the spaces are being used. So as fine they well know, it's the availability of pitches that is an issue as well. I just want to ask though, because I do want to say that I have sympathy with the point that's made in the report around graveyard spaces. Let me be clear, and I'm sure that the mover and seconder of the amendment are in the same position, that we understand that the need to balance both of these issues, and we would hope that officers can do that. I want to ask, members expressed their view quite clearly through a Democratic Decision Act committee previously, and whilst I understand there was a pandemic and a period of transition from Culture and Leisure Services being external back into the council, I'm keen to know what leisure or active and creative communities have actually done about this issue to give effect to the democratically expressed wish of the committee and of elected members to try and generate that interest in Morven Park to bring it back into use for local people. That would be really helpful. Thank you very much, Convener.
Thank you, Jordan. Nicole, do you want to respond to that? I think you already made a comment on it, but you want to come back in?
I'm quite happy to give further detail, Councillor Burrows, and then if necessary, call on my colleague Heather Liddle to elucidate that further. But in terms of the timeline, I'll just go through that for the committee. The land at Morven Street was declared surplus to current sports provision by the former Culture and Leisure North Lanarkshire in early 2020. The ground, and it's explained in paragraphs 1.4 of the report and 2.6, it was deemed in summary not of a viable standard. The pitch and pavilion are described as being in significant disrepair. So the pitch, indeed, even at that point in early 2020, wasn't a pitch which was in use. It wasn't maintained as in use as a pitch, and Culture and Leisure North Lanarkshire had declared it surplus. The paper to committee on the 24th of September 2020, just last year, just over a year ago, of course, was during the course of the pandemic. And notwithstanding that, Culture and Leisure were also in a position of transferring into the council to become active and creative communities approximately a year ago in April 2021. Since sports pitches, etc., have and the former Culture and Leisure North Lanarkshire has come back to the council, the report explains again that the focus of Heather and the teams has very much been on a sports pitch strategy. It's been on the ability to provide the council with a strategic, evidence-based approach to council investment in sports pitch provision. Convener, it may be that Heather would wish to come in and give any further details. So if you're comfortable, I'll hand over to Heather if there's anything further to add.
Heather, I don't think you need to come in at this point, because I think enough has been said on it. There is no doubt at the time that we take the decision, September 20, there was a lot of things happening then at that particular time. And we know what it is. It's about the pandemic and other things. That's been clearly stated there. The decision was at that time to keep it in-house. Things have overtaken clearly since then. And I think it's been stated quite clearly by other members that their view was that it's a priority for the cemetery. But again, we can cover that in when we go to the vote. Now, I've got one more person, and then I'm going to Tracy to speak on the final part of the amendment. Mary Gourley, you want to make a final comment?
Yes, please. If you look back in the history of Morven Street, the money that was spent on the change of facilities is unaccountable. For the simple reason it was standalone. In Blaine Dodds' time, as Bill Shields so pointed out, he took it from the ground up, put in new boilers, put in new showers. He done absolutely everything and spent a fortune. Within 6 months, it was down to the ground again. When they broke in, stole the boilers. Every week we had people breaking into that particular site. So every week you had to call out plumbers, electricians, they ripped out the wiring. Is that what we're going to go against the people that would so badly need extra space for the bereaved? I think that's a tragedy to put football before the bereaved people when we've got so many new football pitches over in Townhead. The exact same happened. We had change of facilities that we spent a fortune on, and every week we were spending thousands. Bill Shields exactly right. There is no end of money that you would be throwing at them. Also, there was a complaint went in 2017 by the SNP from the people around that area regarding car parking. All the people complained and it was stopped in 2017. There has not been a game played on that pitch because of the complaints by the SNP about the no parking facilities. Is that where we're going to go back again? Because it's worse now than ever it was with car parking. I think we need to take that into consideration as well. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Mary. I'm stopping now. That, as I said, that Mary was the last speaker. Kirsty, Tracy, I'm coming back to yourself to wind up. To let you know, I'll be moving the motion, and I will say a final comment on that, Tracy. So, Tracy, do you want to wind up your amendment?
Yeah, thanks, convener. I'm a wee bit disappointed to hear like the tone of the input from other members. I think we appreciate my group. We appreciate the contents of this report. What we're saying is we need some more information on it. There was a decision made by the members of this council, and that decision wasn't implemented. There's some members have made comments here about democracy and governance. Councillor McPake said that that was a mistake and that we're now doing the right thing. So because I'm assuming he decided it was a mistake at that point in time, and that is actually why nothing happened to bring this land back up into use. That was the decision of the committee at the time. It wasn't wait until somebody shows an interest in it. It was to bring the site back up into use as a playing field. Maybe once it was brought up into the condition it should be for a playing field, more people would have shown an interest in it. I think it's important to take the point on board as well about the availability of other areas for lets. I have received, I can't count the amount of people that have contacted me to say that they can't get lets elsewhere. I'm really disappointed that Kirsten Larson wasn't allowed to speak. She is here to represent the people of that area locally. And one of the points is that that piece of land is within housing all round it. I was having a wee look, and apparently the median home prices in neighbourhoods with a cemetery, they're about 12% lower than similar properties in areas without graveyards. Are we going to make that decision for those people locally? It's up to them to give. They need to have the opportunity to give us their views, and that is what we're asking. Go to the public consultation first. Find out what people want. Wait on the results of the sports strategy, and let us know why the decision made by this committee wasn't implemented. Not that we were in a pandemic and that nobody showed an interest. The decision, what plans were made? What plans were made to bring it up into use? We've not heard that today. I'm genuinely disappointed with the tone. We are taking the agenda item is an important one. The contents of it are an important one. We're asking for more information before we make the final decision on this. One last point, it's been highlighted several times that there has been a shift between burials and cremation, and it has gone from 60-40 for burials to the opposite way, 60-40 for cremation. That might have been because of conditions during the pandemic and you were allowed more people at cremation, but it is a point to take into consideration. People's opinions are changing on whether they want burials or cremations, and again, the point is go back to members of the community and get their thoughts on it before we come to a final decision here. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you for that. And I did say to you, Tracy, I was going to move the motion. So I'm just going to sum up. And just to say, I mean, members, really, this is about a choice. It's a choice for a much needed cemetery extension or to keep a football park. You know, it's to keep a football park that's no use and there's been little or no demand for it. I note in section 1.6 that since September 20, there's been only one football team made a request for the pitch, but alternate accommodation was found that better met their needs, and that's important. Section 1.2 highlights the council is under very much a legal obligation to provide facilities for the burial of those who have passed away. And quite clearly, Coatbridge needs cemetery space and they need it now. I think report under section 1.1 highlights that a report went to the Environmental and Transport Committee in May, I think, 2019. That outlined the approach required to secure land for the extension of existing cemeteries. The council, I believe, has identified clearly that Coatsworth is a suitable site for a cemetery extension. 1.3 in the report states that the cemetery is due to run out of layers by 2026. Now, if this motion is agreed, that capacity will be available for another 25 years. And again, if the motion is agreed, Sports Scotland will be formally consulted on the loss of the pitch. And I understand a way of addressing any loss of a football pitch is about the upgrade of potential existing local sports facilities. And I note that there's other local pitches highlighted, and they're in Appendix 2 in the report. Finally, councillors, I said before, this is a choice for an additional much-needed cemetery or to keep an unused football pitch. The residents of Coatbridge need an extension to the cemetery to bury their loved ones. This is a priority. You all should be comforted by that any consultation that takes place with Sports Scotland will deliver an improvement to another local sports facility, which makes this surely a win-win for everyone. Members, I move the motion and I'm seeking a seconder. Thank you.
I'll second it, Chair.
Thank you.
Sorry, convener, could I just confirm who that was seconding?
It was Councillor Wilkes-Shields.
Thank you.
Kirsty, we now will go to the vote.
Okay, thank you, convener. We have a motion by Councillor Burrows, seconded by Councillor Shields. We have an amendment by Councillor Carricker, seconded by Councillor Hume. This will be a roll call vote. I'll do the members first and then take the substitutes at the end. Councillor Ashraf.
Amendment.
Councillor Baird. Don't believe Councillor Baird is with us today. Councillor Burgess.
Motion.
Councillor Burrows.
Motion.
Councillor Campbell.
Motion.
Councillor Carricker.
Amendment.
Councillor Castles.
Motion.
Councillor Coyle is an apology. Councillor Cullen.
Motion.
Councillor Curran.
Motion.
Councillor Curry is also an apology. Councillor Damasio.
Amendment.
Councillor Docherty.
Motion.
Councillor Farouk. I don't believe he's with us today. Councillor Feeney. Is also not with us. Councillor Fisher.
Motion.
Councillor Fotheringham.
Amendment.
Councillor Goldie.
Amendment.
Councillor Goldsack.
Motion.
Councillor Gourley.
Motion.
Councillor Graham is an apology. Councillor Hume.
Amendment.
Councillor Tom Johnson.
Amendment.
Provost Jones.
Motion.
Councillor Kerr. Not with us today. Councillor Lennon.
Amendment.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Linden.
Amendment.
Councillor Logue.
Motion.
Councillor Ferguson. Oh, sorry, Councillor McGregor.
Amendment.
Councillor McManus.
Amendment.
Councillor McNeill.
Motion.
Councillor McPake.
Motion.
Councillor Morgan. He's not with us today. Councillor O'Rourke.
Motion.
Councillor Redden,
Motion.
Councillor Shevlin,
Motion.
Councillor Shields,
Motion.
Councillor Stubbs is an apology, as is Councillor Valentine. Councillor Watson,
Motion.
Councillor Barclay,
Amendment.
Councillor Douglas,
Motion.
and finally Councillor Quigley.
Motion.
We have 21 for the motion, 12 for the amendment. The motion is carried.
Thank you, colleagues. So moving on to agenda item 23.